It was always short chapters, and part of that was that I started writing it really in fragments when I didn't know I was writing a book yet. It was kind of even before I wrote the application for the workshop. I think partially because I couldn't handle writing anything more than a fragment at a time.
Today's guest is Lexi Kent-Monning, taking us behind the scenes of her autobiographical novel, The Burden of Joy. Lexi shares the many shapes this project took before it reached its final form.
I actually wrote it as straight memoir to begin with. The first draft was just memoir. And I edited it over 5 years. So it took lots of different shapes over that time. I'm going to have so many different versions of it. Like first person, third person. I mean, I tried chronological, nonlinear. I mean, everything.
In this episode, Lexi reveals the 5-year revision that got The Burden of Joy ready for prime time.
So I first started submitting it after only a couple of years of editing. And I don't really regret that, but looking back at it, I'm like, yeah, I get why people passed on this. It wasn't ready for prime time.
And how she found the perfect small press to champion her debut.
So when I first started, I was like, oh, I think you're supposed to have an agent. And so I started just reaching out to agents. And then I was like, oh, maybe you can also submit at the same time to publishers. So I'll also submit to publishers. And so it would usually just take a lot of research.
This is an enlightening and inspiring story of an author who hustled her book into existence and made her publishing dreams happen without an MFA.
There's nothing to writing. All you do is sit down at a typewriter and bleed.
Welcome to The Bleeders, a podcast and support group about book writing and publishing. I'm writer and podcaster Courtney, and each episode I'll bring you new conversations with authors, agents, and publishers about how to write and sell books.
Hi, my name is Lexi Kent-Monning. I'm the author of The Burden of Joy.
When did you first identify as a writer?
So this has happened twice. I identified as a writer and then I didn't, and then I did again.
Oh.
So when I first identified as a writer was when I was a kid, I would say 13 or so. Writing was the first and kind of only thing I got good feedback about. And I wrote poetry, and when I did my first English class in high school, my teacher was he loved the paper I wrote. So that was the first time I identified as a writer, but it also really scared me because it was unsolicited good feedback. And I was like, oh no, now if I actually try at this thing, what if I'm terrible at it? So I'm going to not identify as a writer and just keep going and do whatever. So I really pushed that down for a long time. And then when I was 33 is when I finally identified as a writer.
Oh, wow. What did you do? What did you pursue after high school?
After high school, I did not go to college. I wanted to work in the music industry and got an internship straight out of high school. So I moved from my small coastal town in California, moved to New York with an internship and $100 in my pocket.
Yeah, I know that story.
And just worked. Yeah, exactly. Just interned and then nannied at night to make money and was a waitress and hostess. So I didn't go to college, and I also, because I was working in music, I didn't really have much time for creative writing. So writing was a big part of my job. At the time, I would write press releases and band bios and pitches and all that kind of stuff. And then throughout different careers, I was a celebrity personal assistant. I've worked in tech now for 10 years. So I've always had to write as part of my job. But in terms of creative writing, I basically had no time for it in all of my 20s. And so that's also part of why I didn't identify as a writer. I was not practicing writing. I wasn't really doing it. It wasn't part of my life for a long time, and I always missed it and wanted to get back to it. Then when I was 33, I was getting divorced and signed up to do a writing workshop in Italy, and I kind of just wanted to go to Italy.
Fair enough.
And I got accepted to this workshop, and I was like, oh, this will be fun. It'll just be an experience. But it totally changed my life. And after that week, I was like, I'm a writer, and all I want to do is figure out all of my work life. I want to make it so that I just have more time for creative writing. I want creative writing to take up more of my life now, and want to really focus on it more. So that was when I started identifying as a writer and really started actually doing it seriously and earnestly.
I love that. And I can see the fingerprints of your story on your book of,
yeah,
your age
totally.
And getting divorced. And yeah, that's interesting. What's your all-time favorite book?
This is such a mean question.
I know.
Because it's so hard. I also started getting like, you know, when you're at a restaurant and you have the menu for too long and you start getting like menu regret. Like I changed my choice so many times with this question. Okay, I have a few, but I think the first one that I really called a favorite book that really wanted me to like made me want to be a writer was Dangerous Angels by Francesca Leah Block. She's a YA author.
Oh, I have not read that.
Oh my God, it's amazing. I think she wrote the first, it's a series. And so it's the Weetzie Bat series, and it got compiled into the Dangerous Angels collection. But the first one she wrote in, I think, 1989. And it's all about Los Angeles. And it's like, she's such a sensory, beautiful writer. It's all about like clothes and food. Like all of her descriptions are so magical. And there's like, it's like a punk rock girl and her gay best friend. And it's just like, I mean, it is such catnip. It's like, I love it so much. And I go back and reread that at least once a year. I love it so much. And she's such an amazing writer. She's written a ton since then. But Dangerous Angels is like the Weetzie Bat series. And that was really my, like the first time I picked up a book at Bookshop Santa Cruz and was like, what's this? And then after that, I was like, I didn't know writing could be like this. And I love this so much. So that's my like original answer. Since then, I would say things like Bluettes by Maggie Nelson and Revenge of the Lawn by Richard Brodigan. I'm from Salinas originally, so I'm a big Steinbeck girl. So Cannery Row is definitely one. But yeah, so I'll stop there. But those are a few.
Okay. What's your dream writing routine?
Dream writing routine is I am alone for months and nobody can call me or text me. And I'm like in a cabin in the woods. I have a dog. I wake up early, walk the dog. My ideal writing routine is just lots of walking and thinking, and then like maybe an hour of actual writing. So that would be my dream writing routine.
And then what's your real writing routine? How does it actually go down?
I usually wake up at 5 and write. And then
What? You are one of those.
I'm one of those. And this is like so shocking to me and my family because I would sleep till like 1 p.m. in an earlier stage of life. Like I was such a night owl and late person. And then I worked on a TV show for 4 years where my call times would be like 4 a.m. and 5 a.m. And so I just like my chemistry changed and now I'm a morning person. And like I can't even, like, I can maybe sleep till 7 if I'm lucky, but I just can't stay asleep that late. Like, I go to sleep at 9:30 because I get tired. And then I, like, very easily wake up at 5 or 6. So the realistic writing routine is I wake up really early and I write, but, like, oftentimes that gets taken up by things like admin shit, like emails or like, you know, doing a written interview or whatever. So it's not actual writing, but I'm a member of Chelsea Hodson's morning writing club. So I usually will do that. I sign on at 8 in the morning my time, and I'll do it for an hour before I have to sign on to my real job, my paying job. So usually 8 to 9 every morning is like when I really actually hunker down and like do it, because I have that community and that kind of like, I'm responsible to a group of people if I do that. And that really helps me to have like be committed to something and other people. Whereas like in theory, I wake up at 5 to write, but I'm like responding to emails and like looking at the news and being horrified. But then I actually start writing at 8.
Still pretty good. Nice.
Yeah.
What's one piece of writing that makes you jealous you didn't write it?
I feel like I don't really get jealous of stuff. I'm kind of just like more excited that it exists because it like makes me think differently, or it elevates writing to such different heights where I'm like, oh my God, I'm so glad this exists. So like, I don't really get jealous. I kind of wish I did because I think it can be a good motivator sometimes. I just don't have that. But I would say the last time I really was just so struck by something that it made me want to really elevate my writing was a book called Good Women by Hallie Hill. It came out last year, and I did a workshop with her maybe 2 years ago. We were both like students in the workshop, and her stories were consistently so amazing. And then like halfway through the workshop, she was like, I got a book deal. It's a short story collection. And we all were like, yes, thank God. And so her book came out last fall. I think it was like October or September on Hub City Press. It's called Good Women, and it's so good. It's unbelievable. Like it reminds me of like Carson McCullers and all these incredible older, like, you know, from another time, Southern writers. It's so amazing. It like I read that book and I want to throw my laptop out the window because I'll never write that well. But then I'm also like so glad that I exist in a time where I get to read this book.
Yeah. And workshop with people like that. That's so nice when you're like,
totally.
Yeah. In a group with people, you're like, these people are awesome.
Exactly.
So, okay, let's talk about The Burden of Joy. Explain the premise to the listeners.
So it is autofiction, so autobiographical fiction about my life. And the protagonist is named Lexi, so you can decide how much of it is autobiographical and how much is fiction. But the premise and the kind of inciting incident is the narrator, Lexi, her husband leaves her on Valentine's Day to join a commune in Big Sur. And then from there, she kind of deals with that fallout and the grief of that, and then meets another guy in New York and has this kind of bi-coastal, hedonistic shit show, love affair, grief parade.
Uh-huh. Yes. Did you toy around with memoir, or, how did you land on autofiction?
Yeah, I actually wrote it as straight memoir to begin with. The first draft was just memoir. And I edited it over 5 years. So it took lots of different shapes over that time. I'm going to have so many different versions of it. Like first person, third person. I mean, I tried so much stuff. Chronological, nonlinear. I mean, everything. It was ridiculous. But partially because I didn't go in really anticipating to write a book. I wasn't really my intention. So at some point I was like, oh shit, I'm writing a book. So like I have to figure out, I guess it's memoir. But then it kind of mutated. And part of that I think was just like time and space away from the actual events happening in my life. And then kind of wanting there to be a better story arc than there was in real life. Like deciding for it to be autofiction made me be able to take liberties and kind of like make more of a story arc and like enhance certain characteristics of characters or like make amalgamations. So that was kind of what it was. It was kind of more of a creative thing. I was like, I felt freer to play around with that. Whereas like I felt guilty to keep calling it memoir because I was like, well, this is not necessarily true. I don't know if I'm allowed to do this.
Yeah. Okay. So where did the first nugget come out? Like, did that happen when you were in Italy?
Yeah, so I had to turn in for this workshop, and it's called Mors Tua Vita Mea, and it was led by Chelsea Hodson and the late Giancarlo Di Trapano of Tyrant Books. And so I applied to that workshop, and I think the application, you had to submit like 10 pages or 20 pages or something. And so I had been just writing fragments and kind of collecting random stuff with no goal. But when I saw that workshop, I was like, oh, I want to apply to this. And so I the first nugget was putting together some stuff to just make an application. Mm-hmm. And in the application, they were like, what are you submitting? What is this? And I was like, I kind of have no idea what this is. And like, that's part of why I want to go to the workshop is like, y'all tell me what this is, you know? Uh-huh. But yeah, that was the first thing, was like 10 or 20 pages of trying to just like put some themes together and make a little bit of a cohesive nugget to apply to the workshop with.
And then tell us about the process from there. You said it took 5 years. And there were some readers that were mentioned in the acknowledgments. So how did it finally start to take shape, and how many drafts do you think you did? Stuff like that.
Oh, geez. I know. Sometimes I think I should count the drafts. I know I printed out and physically have 9 drafts, but that was just the stuff I like printed out because I could afford to get printer ink that month. So totally. Some drafts just live on my computer. So at the workshop, the folks there, like in my cohort, were like, we think this could be something longer. It was, it ended up being, I think what I brought to Italy was like 50 pages or something. And they encouraged me to keep going. And so I kept going. Like I came back home and I just kept writing and kept writing. Then I think at like 75 pages was when I realized like, oh, I think this is a book. Okay, like now let me figure this out. And so I finished the first draft in 7 months and sent it to Chelsea Hodson and Hurley Winkler, who was in my cohort at that workshop. And they both gave me like manuscript consults basically. And then from there was when I started the heavy revision process. So that was, the first draft was 7 months. All the edits were 5 years. And so that just went a number of different ways. And I had over the years, like Giancarlo read a draft and he gave me feedback. Then he died. And then I went back to like another version that Chelsea had edited. Like, so it was just kind of a whole hodgepodge. I think the hardest thing was taking a few months at a time away from it because I would get so obsessive, and also like I wasn't seeing the forest for the trees, and I would start to realize that, be like, I'm so obsessed with like this one line edit that doesn't matter. Like what I need to focus on is story, but I can't see that right now. So yeah, so I would say probably 100 drafts overall, something like that, probably.
How many readers did you had? Chelsea and Giancarlo, like how many readers do you think you had along the way?
In the end, it was just a few. So it was Hurley, Chelsea, Giancarlo, and then that might have been it until I started submitting it. And then my eventual publisher, DT, he read it. And then we had like an editorial, and he has an editorial intern who read it too. But that was once I had like signed the book deal. So it was a little more like vision focused, or like, kind of final stages editing. So I think it was really just like 3 readers up until that point.
Did you get a feeling like it was done, or were you like, I just need to be done?
Yeah, it was kind of like, I just need to be done. In fact, the first few drafts didn't really have an ending. Like, I kind of just stopped writing.
Oh, yeah.
And it was like very inconclusive. And so that was one piece of feedback that Chelsea gave me on the first draft that was really helpful. She was like, obviously you're still living this, so it's hard to find an ending. So she was like, I would suggest looking for something that either echoes like the first chapter, so that you're kind of closing the book and it like mirrors the beginning and the end, or look for like a tangible physical thing that you can let your readers hold on to, because so much of it is like it's like a thought process, lots of interiority. And so she thought it would help to like ground the reader with like some physical emblems. And so that was really helpful. And so I kind of felt like I was walking around New York for like 6 months, just like looking for something to like be the end of my book. And then I found it. I was looking out my window one night and found the Empire State Building on Valentine's Day was like doing this heartbeat light pattern. And I was like, that's the end of my book.
Oh, nice. Nice.
Yeah.
So where did some of the other choices, okay, you used your name. Was that a debate that you had?
It wasn't really. It's funny. That was the one thing I really didn't have a problem with, was using my own name. It was using other people's names that was the harder part for me. And so I changed some names and not others. Using my own name, I never really thought about it. It just felt natural to me. And that was like an easy thing. Using other people's names, I changed pretty much everybody's names except for the dogs. And
that's appropriate.
Exactly, right. I mean, hopefully they'll never complain. And then my landlady / godmother, Tasha. And the reason I wanted to keep her name was that Henry Miller wrote about her too. And so I wanted to have her name in one of my books as well.
That's sweet.
I wanted it to be a continuation, because he wrote about her when she was like 5 or 6 years old. And now she's like 75. And I was like, maybe somebody will read both of those books. Like, he wrote about her in Big Sur and the Oranges of Hieronymus Bosch. And I was like, maybe someday someone would read both of these books and they'll be like, oh, that Tasha that was 5 in this book is now 75 in the other one, and she's still doing great.
Oh, that's a sweet connection. Yeah. And then the short chapters and naming them.
Yeah.
How did that come about? Was that always there?
It was always short chapters. And part of that was that I started writing it really in fragments when I didn't know I was writing a book yet. It was kind of, even before I wrote the application for the workshop, I think partially because I couldn't handle writing anything more than a fragment at a time.
Yeah.
And then I just kind of liked it being small bite-sized things. Like, as a reader, I really like that. I like reading something. Yeah. It feels like you're being friendly to the reader.
It's fast. You're like, oh, this is snackable. I can like get through this. I can like pick it up and put it down.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, I have some of that in my memoir in progress, and I was curious how you landed on it, because it's not necessarily conventional.
Yeah, exactly. And it didn't used to have it used to not have titles. It was numbers to start. Also, I was kind of ripping off Maggie Nelson from Bluettes, because she does that. And at workshop, Giancarlo was like, get rid of these numbers. And I was like, all right. And then it ended up actually just being helpful for me editing to have titles, because I would remember like, oh, this is called this. Like, when I was searching for whatever it was that I wanted to edit or whatever, it just ended up being more helpful, like organizationally on my end, to have them titled.
Yeah.
And then I just thought that it worked well. It kind of like oriented the reader to what was happening sometimes, or just gave like a little extra insight into something. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so you decided you were done, and then how did you come up with your game plan about where to submit, and how did that go?
So I first started submitting it after only a couple of years of editing, and I don't really regret that, but looking back at it, I'm like, yeah, I get why people passed on this. It wasn't ready for prime time, but I also I started sending it around right when COVID hit, which was just like bad luck. It was like, I know, so I have some other friends that are in the same boat who like now are also getting book deals. And we're like, oh, it's like the COVID wave of people who submitted at just the wrong time, you know? So I was either interested in getting an agent or dealing with like an indie publisher. And I wasn't sure if I should pitch both at the same time. Like I kind of didn't know how that went. So I pitched both. I like found indie publishers that I really loved. And usually that was from finding like a book that I loved and then looking up the publisher or reading the acknowledgments and finding out who the agent was in the book that I loved and thinking like, okay, this maybe is like a comp title to something they already published or whatever. And so I got a couple of like requests for full manuscripts from agents, got a couple of passes, and then just got so many non-responses. I had this like crazy big spreadsheet of everyone that I was pitching and like why, like, oh, this was like so-and-so's agent or they represented this book or whatever. And I had like 45 rejections at one point or non-responses. And at that point I just stopped keeping track because I was like, whatever. But it also kind of helped, like, I don't know, rejection sometimes to me is a motivator more than something like jealousy, like we talked about earlier. So anyway, so I was like, just kind of fire hosing. I didn't really ever think this would be like a big 5 book and didn't necessarily want it to be. So that's someone else's like journey or whatever. It's just not mine. So I was pitching it and submitting it to a bunch of places. Sometimes I would get like, you know, a sentence or two of feedback, which was always so helpful. And that would definitely help me go into another revision with like more of a focus or just a different perspective that could be helpful. Yeah. And then it just ended up finally after, you know, several years, ended up in the right hands. And my publisher's rejection letters, and it had been just a literary magazine. And then the publisher, D.T. Robbins, decided to start a book imprint. And I had a piece published in the magazine before, so I knew of them and I knew of D.T. And then he himself published this really beautiful, sad auto fiction piece that was like about his first Christmas after divorce. And when I read that, I was like, oh my God, I wish this guy published books because like this would be the perfect person. And then like a month later, he announced that he was going to start an imprint. And I was like, yes.
Oh, amazing.
So I like stalked his Twitter. And as soon as he opened his submittable, I submitted my manuscript right away. And then he like attached to it and we had a call the next week and it just happened really fast from there.
Oh, wow. When you were submitting you had your spreadsheet with the agents, were you doing that same kind of thing with small presses, and were you going out to like one at a time, or were you kind of doing them in batches? How are you pursuing it?
Yeah, I was doing it kind of in batches. And like, so when I first started, I was like, oh, I think you're supposed to have an agent. And so like, I started just reaching out to agents. And then I was like, oh, maybe you can also submit at the same time to publishers. So I'll also submit to publishers. And so it would usually just take a lot of research. And I would collect like 5 or 6 names. And, you know, they all, between publishers and agents, they all require such different things to submit that I would like collect 5 or 6 and then I'd be like, okay, I have a day off and like I'll do a batch then. And that's like when I'll get them all ready and submit to like 5 or 6 either publishers or agencies, kind of whenever time allowed.
Okay. And then you have just been promoting. When did it come out?
November 1st.
How did you pursue the book tour and the book launch? That's always like a thing when you're with a small press, is you're having to kind of do that yourself.
Yeah, totally. So same thing with the spreadsheets. I'm just a spreadsheet bitch. I had like for a while before it came out been collecting names and like outlets that I thought might cover it. So like I cold emailed you, we hadn't known each other, but I listened to the Bleeders and I was like, oh, this might be a good spot to pitch or whatever. So I have like, you know, another long spreadsheet of places with just whether it was interviews or reviews or whatever it might be and podcasts and et cetera. I just like made this big old spreadsheet. And then we didn't end up doing physical arcs. My publisher was like totally up for that. But Chelsea Hudson at Rose Books was like, I just did digital because like I'm a fledgling indie press and like we just can't afford it. And I was like, that makes sense to me. That's fine. Yeah. Like, so we just did digital arcs. I think there was like 1 or 2 people that were like, I'll just wait for the physical copy. And like I sent them my author copies, So like, but to me, it was like outlets that were worth that. Because I only get 15 copies and then I have to pay for them. I don't know. So I had this whole spreadsheet of all these people to contact, and I just started emailing people. And so it was like, I'd be like, I have this book coming out. Here's why I think you might like to cover it. Here are the blurbs about it. Like, just anything to kind of legitimize myself as a debut author. And my book was the first one on my publisher's press too. So it was like inaugural for both of us. And so I just wanted to really legitimize myself. So I did everything I could in those pitches. And I worked on that for a long time, like kind of creating the perfect pitch. So that was just kind of how that started. And I was lucky to have some momentum. I also like, I've been part of the writing community for a few years now. And so that's also been helpful. It's like people that I've just been friends with happen to be a writer for whatever outlet, and they would pitch me to their editor and that would get accepted. And like, that's not why I'm part of a community, but it certainly is like a lovely byproduct of community. Like we encourage each other and we get excited or bummed for each other about whatever's happening. But then like when a big thing does happen, those are the first people to be like, oh, like, let me help you with this, or like, I'll cover this for whatever. So that's been really encouraging and lovely.
That's great. So were you happy with the responses to your pitches you made from the spreadsheet? And did you get any big wins out of that? I saw, regular press coming on your Instagram. So
yeah, I have been so blown away, and it's been amazing. People have been incredible and so generous with their venues and their time and space. And yeah, it's been amazing. I like cold emailed a bunch of people, and I also tweeted and like Instagrammed, like, I have digital arcs available. If you want to cover this somewhere, let me know. And so I had a couple of freelancers who reached out and wanted arcs, and then they ended up getting them placed. So like one of them was placed in Los Angeles Review of Books, which
great.
To me like blew my mind. I never ever thought that could happen. And that was just from like tweeting about it. And a freelancer was like, I want to try to pitch LARB. And I was like, great. And then he was like, yeah, they want it. I was like, oh my God. And another, someone who's in Morning Writing Club with me, Devin Kate Pope, she, like, we did an interview and she was pitching at different places. And then Bomb Magazine picked it up. And then also from like community too, one of my friends, Allie Rowbottom, she like connected me with a writer from Nylon who was like, she liked my book, I think she'll like your book. And then she did. And so she covered my book for Nylon. So yeah, it's been an unbelievably, I mean, I thought from my spreadsheet I would get like maybe a few tepid responses, but people have been so incredible and generous, and yeah, I've been blown away. Like, I can't believe it. I can't believe I'm on your podcast right now because I've been listening to it for a year. So you're one of the wins on that spreadsheet.
Yay.
Yay.
Awesome. So what's next?
I don't know yet. I have I have one manuscript done that's straight up memoir. It's a sex memoir about like consenting, non-consenting experiences, how those inform each other, all that kind of stuff. I thought that would be my next project, but it has been interesting to see how just having something autofiction out has been exhausting in different ways than I expected. Like having your personal life out there in ways that are like, I don't regret any of it, and I'm very proud of it and glad I did it, but I can't believe how many like trauma dumps I get from people I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
Like I get emails from people or DMs or whatever, and it's like, on the one hand, I'm so honored that like my book hit for them or resonated somehow. Yeah, like that's incredible. But also like I am not a licensed therapist, and like some of the stuff they share, I'm like, oh my God, this is like such a huge thing to, like, I feel so responsible for the things people send me. And so not that I don't want to eventually do that book, but I think that I would like to have something different as my next thing. So I don't know. I have also like kind of half a manuscript done that's more like Richard Brautigan style, like mix of poetry and prose. I co-wrote a screenplay with a friend a couple years ago that we haven't touched since then. Yeah, I don't know yet. Also, it's funny, like once you have a book out, people approach you with different stuff. So like that's been awesome. I have like editors reaching out being like, do you want to send us a piece for this magazine or whatever? And
great.
Anything for like a bigger project kind of gets pushed away because I'm getting these amazing opportunities that are shorter term and in the moment. And that's also fun. It's nice to work on shorter stuff after working on a long thing for a long time.
Yeah.
I really like that kind of shift in focus of working on a smaller chunk instead of like a big spread.
Yeah, it's like different brain space, I'm sure, too.
just,
Totally.
promoting the book and then digging back into something else is like a different energy. So you sort of have to like go through the seasons, I think.
Absolutely. That's so true. Oh, yeah. And you asked about book tour too. That was so fun. I just put that together myself and like used miles and like went into a little bit of credit card debt. But I was like, I just want to do
Worth
this. It's
it.
like,
Yeah.
who knows if I'll ever have another book out. I would love to read it in front of people and like celebrate it with people, And so that was really fun and fulfilling. And it helped me meet other writers who are on kind of the same trajectory. Like their books came out around the same time. And that's such a nice bond to have with people. So now they're all in the same thing of being like, are you guys all like wrecked from promo and like talking about this all the time? And like, I haven't written in weeks because I'm just too tired. I'm like, yeah, me too. So that's comforting as well.
Nice. Where did you go for the book tour?
I just went, so I live in New York. So I had an event here and then LA and San Diego.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Yeah, it was so fun. And a bunch of my family came out they also live in California. So they all came down and yeah, it was so fun. And it was just like, I don't know, getting to read with some of your favorite writers, like the LA event I put together. And it was just like my favorite LA writers who were available. And it was like, I just want to sit here and watch them read. And like, oh yeah, I have to at the end, but like, this is amazing.
That's great. Hey Bleeders, just wanted to pop in and let you know about a workshop I am teaching on Saturday, September 21st. It's called How to Land Big Bylines. Of course, it is a classic goal of pretty much every writer to see their byline in a big splashy outlet, but it can be hard to land that big break. Well, in my upcoming 2-hour masterclass, I am teaching you how to slip in through the side door. That is right, through the column, baby. This strategy has worked for me time and time again, and it has worked for previous students. You will leave class with 10 ideas, several early drafts, and all the editor emails and pitching best practices you need. There is also the option to upgrade for personalized feedback and a 20-minute consultation. Registration starts at just $72, which I have to say is quite a steal. There is a link in the episode description with all the details, and I hope to see you there. What are your bucket list writing goals?
Okay, I would love to write a play. I am so bad at dialogue, and I feel like writing a play would force me to become better at dialogue. So that's one thing I would love to do. I want to write a really good short story. I feel like I've never done that, and I would love to do that. Yeah, and I think just in general, continue having writing be a big part of my daily life or like weekly life. I'm not a write every day kind of person, and that's fine with me, but I like how much of my life, I like how much writing I get to do and how much reading and writing takes up in my life, and I want to maintain that. I don't ever want to get like super bogged down with a job again where I can't have that. So it's a low bucket list goal, but to me it is bucket list because I think it's so easy to get so swept away in work and the hustle and making a living and all that stuff. So I always want to protect the writer part of my life.
Yeah, that's like honestly the best bucket list writing goal because it's like making writing your lifestyle, which is the thing.
Exactly. Totally. Yeah. It might seem like low fruit, but sometimes that's, I don't know, all I can reach for.
Yeah, no, and the time is the important part. So what piece of writing advice do you wish you could give your former self?
Ooh, this is hard. I actually wrote down, let me look what I wrote to myself about this because I've been thinking about this a lot. Oh, okay. If I could tell my younger writing self anything, it would be, you don't have to write every day to be a writer.
Yeah.
That's such a fallacy, I think. And I think it makes people just get psyched out of even starting. You don't have to write every day to be a writer and to take yourself seriously. I think I also would tell myself, don't blindly follow every piece of advice everybody gives you. Like try different advice and see what is the right thing for you. I've tried all the different routines and the different whatevers, and some of that stuff sticks and is a good match for me, and some of it isn't. But like, don't feel bad if something is not the key for you. Just try different stuff and see what works.
Yeah, that's good. What's one tip for writers trying to get a book published?
I would say don't be super committed to just one idea for where it might end up. If you think you're just going to be in one of the big 5, you'll probably be disappointed. And then you'll not be able to celebrate like when you do get some win somewhere else. And also, I've got to say, like, I've had such a beautiful, positive experience being on an indie press. It's been incredible. And I have friends that have books on major publishers where it has been quite the opposite. And I just feel so like I've never had to like make a compromise on something that felt really important to me. I don't know. I just feel like there's a lot more collaboration and freedom on indie presses, and there's just so much more interesting approaches and books on indies these days. So yeah, I mean, who wouldn't want to see themselves on the New York Times bestseller list? But that's kind of unlikely, so don't have that be your only measure of success.
Yeah. Also, it doesn't have to be your first book.
Totally. Yeah. Just like have an open mind about where things might end up or what your trajectory might be.
What's your all-time favorite piece of your own writing?
I think it's this piece called Self Audit, and it's in a magazine from New Orleans called Tilted House Review. And it is like they do like a beautiful job hand binding. It's like this beautiful piece of, it's a physical thing that's so gorgeous. But that piece just came really easily to me in ways that often it doesn't. And I just really like, I just really like that piece. And I think partially because it's not online, not many people have seen it. And so I just like hold it very precious and I just love it. It's just something that like came naturally. It found a place naturally. And I have it up on my bookshelf and I look at it and I'm like, I love that piece.
Oh, is it memoir or fiction?
It's memoir. Yeah. It's a short little flash piece, but it's nonfiction.
Nice. Okay, well, this has been awesome. I had a wonderful time reading your book, The Burden of Joy. I was like, let's save Lexi from these fuckboys, but I hope that's happening in your real life.
Yes, I have been saved. I'm actually currently in my boyfriend's apartment recording this because they were doing construction at mine. And he was like, oh, you got to have somewhere. Like, this is his microphone. He set me up with tea and water. Okay. No fuckboys here.
Yay. Big win there. Okay. That is it for this edition of The Bleeders. If you missed the last episode with John Small, make sure to go back and check it out. John self-published his debut Right About Now, which is based on his podcast, and it hit #1 on Amazon's Hot New Releases chart, which is super impressive. Here is a little preview of that conversation.
I just started writing an introduction about kind of like why I'm writing this book, what my origin story is, why I think origin stories are important. I interviewed an expert on origin stories just to kind of get her perspective.
Smart.
And then there was this decision of like, should I try to self-publish the, well, I don't like that word. Should I use an indie publisher or should I try to go to a major publishing house?
Thank you for joining me for this episode of The Bleeders. Oh, writing is so much better with friends. I'm your host, Courtney Kosak, and hey, let's connect on social media. I am at Courtney Kosak, last name Kosak, on Twitter and Instagram. And make sure you're signed up for the Bleeders Companion Substack. I send out Q&As and other stuff that is exclusive to the newsletter, so you're definitely going to want to make sure you're subscribed. There is a link for that in the episode description. And join me again next time for more writing and publishing insights. In the meantime, happy bleeding!